black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know.
I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun, grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage, all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. We'll be going down to Florida and talking to Adam. He was out with his family. They were driving around, and him and his parents, they all saw this skunk ape. And about 6 years later, in his backyard with his brothers, they ran into something much, much worse than a skunk ape. Then we'll be talking to Jack. Jack's retired military. He's going to be sharing an encounter with us that he had on the base, Fort Lewis, Washington, while he was training. And he also will be sharing some of the strange things that happened to him over in Iraq. And I asked him, was there anything weird that happened over there? His answer might surprise you. And then we'll wrap up with Emily, who comes to us from Missouri. And she was out with her husband camping. Very strange night camping. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, please check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Adam to the show. Adam, thanks for coming on.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate being here, and I can't wait to hear some of your encounters. If you would you start with the skunk ape? I know this happened in Florida. If you would, just kind of tell us what you were doing and what happened?
Yeah, it's in northwest Florida, kind of in the middle of nowhere. We were driving down the road with my parents. My dad was driving, my mom in the passenger seat, and I was directly behind my mom. We were driving down the stretch of the highway, kind of over this bridge a little bit where the Yellow River is. And then all of a sudden I heard my mom just go, there's a man down there in a ghillie suit. And then my dad slams on the brakes. And he goes, no, that's a damn skunk ape. And he slammed on the brakes and then on the side of the highway. And I looked up and, there it was, walking away from the river. But I think when it saw us, it kind of crouched down into the brush and then went back into the wood line.
Can you describe what you saw?
Yeah, it was a lighter brown, red-brown colored, definitely walking on 2 feet. The brush was kind of tall. It's right next to the river, and so everything's kind of grown up right there. Nobody ever goes down there, and so from where its body was, you could definitely tell it was about 7.5, 8 foot tall. And then as soon as it crouched down, we couldn't really see it anymore. You can kind of see where the brush was moving a little bit, and that was about it. So as it kind of like it would crouch down just to kind of walk out of the way, so we couldn't see it.
Your dad must have seen him before. He sounds like he knew what he was looking at.
Yeah, my dad explained that he saw multiple things like that growing up in that little town he grew up in. And then even when he said when he was in the military, he would see stuff when he was stationed up in Alabama.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just had Chad on, who was from Alabama, or he's not from Alabama, but he was on that base out there in Alabama. I'm sure they have more than one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Did you ever talk to your parents afterwards, or did your mom change her mind as far as it being a guy in a ghillie suit?
My mom now will say, that it was a bear with mange. She swears up and down it was a black bear with mange. But our black bears down here are tiny. They don't get very big at all, and even with mange, you can still tell that they're black bears because of the color, and the color was off. It was a lot different than a black bear, even a black bear with mange.
And even for it to be, upright walking on two legs, most bears don't get up and walk around on two legs.
No. That's what it definitely looked like. It was very human-like, other than the fact that it was, so much bigger and hairier. Other than the coloring being off, it almost looked like a very tall man in a ghillie suit.
And what part of Florida is this in, if you don't mind?
It's Northwest Florida. It was, I think we were heading between what's called Holt. It's a tiny little town in the middle of the woods, and then we were heading to Navarre.
I gotcha. And then how many years later, I know Adam, you were out with your brothers and hanging out. I don't know the whole story yet, but when you guys ran into that other creature, how many years later, and was this actually on your property that you ran into that dogman-like creature?
Yeah, this was about 6 years later, and this was on our property, and it was at our mom's house, and we were all sitting in the back. It was me, my older brother, and 3 of his friends, so 5 of us total. And it was about midnight. We're all sitting in lawn chairs in the backyard, and then her yard, from where we were sitting, about 20 foot back, is the wood line. And then we have a back light, so it's pretty well lit back there. But we kept hearing, pebbles or acorns getting thrown at us, and we didn't really think about it because there's, squirrels all over the place. They're probably just knocking stuff out of the trees. When all of a sudden, a bone from a cow landed in front of us. It looked like the femur. Just landed right in front of us. And then when we looked up, we saw the dog man walk out of the wood line. And then my brother, jumped up. And, my brother's he's a big guy, 6'5", 250 pounds. And I think at first it was kind of challenged. And it just looked at us until we all stood up. And as soon as we all stood up, it took off back into the wood line. It was definitely pretty tall, dark brown to black colored hair, with a body that looked, more like a human on the body, but you can definitely tell it was a dog's face, just a real mean wolf, or like, let's see, I have a Doberman Pinscher, and the face kind of looked like that, except the legs were extremely muscular, a lot more muscular than the rest of the body, and you can tell that the legs were definitely its strong suit.
What did your brother say? What did all the guys say after it walked off?
Everyone kind of freaked out, but right away I just said, I have to go to bed. I'm like, that my brain's playing tricks on me. I didn't see this. I have to go to sleep. I don't know if my body was just like, or my brain just told me, no, this can't be real. You have to go, So I went to sleep, and the next morning, my brother, he woke me up, and he was like, we have to talk about what happened last night. And I said, well, nothing happened last night. That wasn't real. And he goes, no, all of us saw it. We all saw the exact same thing. And so every one of the guys were kind of skeptical about it, but once we all said the exact same thing, and we even told our little brothers, the exact same thing at different times to each other.
Yeah, that's terrifying, man. That's terrifying. What did your brother think it was? I mean, because it doesn't really look like a Sasquatch, I would imagine. And,
No.
With the dog's head and kind of the body of a man. What did your brother think it was?
My brother, right away, he thought it was a werewolf. And if you want me to tell this story as well, my older brother, the same brother actually, when we lived in an even smaller town than this, just 30 minutes north, he was driving home from football practice one day, and he says one ran out in front of his car. And he said it was the exact same thing that he saw the night it ran out in front of his car was what we saw at my mom's property.
Oh, so this was the second time him seeing kind of the similar...
That was the second time him seeing it. And when he told us about that before, none of us believed him. We just thought, okay, he's just looking for attention or whatever, until we all saw the exact same thing.
What's your take on it throwing that femur out there?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was trying to get our attention or to scare us away. I'm not sure if we were in its path. I mean, it could have been trying to cut through our yard to go to the other side of the woods. I'm not really sure what its intentions were, and I didn't really want to stick around to find out. I'm just glad it didn't either.
Do you remember its eyes glowing, or was there anything that you remember about the face beyond it looking like a dog? Just out of my own curiosity.
Yeah, I remember the light was shining on it, and so you could see, how dark the face was, and you could see that the eyes were dark, and you can even see the reflection of the light off of its eyes.
Did it ever vocalize or anything?
No, it didn't make a sound, and until it took off into the woods, and then we heard the rustling.
Jeez, man, I'd have nightmares for like months after seeing something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would dream about it all the time. And then even my older brother now, he likes to tell our family about it anytime we see him. And he gets choked up every time we talk about it.
What did your family say when you guys brought it up? I mean,
everyone was pretty skeptical. My girlfriend, she's like, okay, that's just scary. It could be, whatever, don't know what it is. That's just scary. And the rest of my family, some of them, the ones that live in that same town where my brother saw the other one, they all believe him because they swear up and down they've seen the same thing. But then the family that lives where we live now, none of them kind of believe us.
Yeah, it's out there. I mean, and I believe that these things are out there. I mean, it does seem far-fetched to half man, half dog, but I've heard stranger. And, it reminds me of, I had this lady on the show. Gosh, I need to do a follow-up with her. She had a farm out there. I believe it was in Indiana. And she came across one. Didn't know what it was, and it was growling at her and acted like, I think it attacked her dog, if I remember right. And her young son said he had seen it the day before. This was after she saw it. And she's like, why didn't you tell me? He's like, what am I supposed to tell you? I saw a werewolf. But he saw it on the edge of a field. And they're not as common, I would say, as Sasquatch, but people do see them. And the people that do see them, they're very consistent in their reports as far as what they saw. Was it on two legs the whole time that you were looking at it?
It was the entire time. When it walked out, I don't know if it was just trying to intimidate it with its size. When it walked out, it was completely on two feet, and then when it took off in the woods, it kind of, hunched over and just took off.
Did it ever drop down to fours, on all fours?
Not that I saw, at least not at the wood line or anything. But there's also a fence right there. So, I mean, just a few feet in, and it would have had to clear that fence. Yeah. Within about 10 feet from the wood line, he would have had to clear the fence.
It's bizarre, man. I wish I had a good answer for you on what they are, but I mean, I hear about them a lot. I hear a lot of the Dogman reports, and a lot of people don't want to come forward and share it, so I really appreciate that you'd come forward and share it, because I think people are thinking, what do you say? You saw a werewolf? I mean, they're only supposed to exist in movies, right? And you're wrong, because they do exist, and I've talked to many people who've seen them. What other things have you seen out of that property? Anything else that was odd?
Yeah, driving back to that property one day, I'd say it was probably 1 o'clock in the morning. My younger brothers and I were driving back to the property, and up in the sky we saw just a glowing triangle hovering over a retention pond in the woods. And so I slammed on the brakes, and we all saw it. It was me, my two younger brothers, and my brother's best friend. And we all looked at it, and it was just staying completely still about 300 yards above the ground, just staying there. And, I drive this path, every day and never see anything over there during the day or night. So our first thought was, we have to grab Mom, she won't believe us. So we took off down the road, pulled into the driveway, and we grabbed my mom, and as we come back, it's gone.
What color was it? You said it was glowing?
Yeah, it was like glowing blue, like a light blue.
How big do you think it was? I mean, I know it's kind of hard to gauge. It's up a little bit, but I mean, compared to, like a 747 or smaller or bigger?
I'd say from each corner was probably 45 feet.
It's fascinating, man. What do you think it was? Do you think it was something our government has, or do you think it was something else?
Oh, I don't know. We live, this property is pretty close to a lot of military bases, a lot of naval air stations, and different Air Force bases. So there's a possibility of it being, something from our government, but I don't see how something could be so quiet, hovering like that above that little area.
Yeah, Florida has some weird stuff, man. There's definitely a lot of UFO encounters out there. There's a lot of weird lights. There's Dogman. It seems like Florida kind of has it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what. Anytime you get on the news, you always see something about a Florida man. So,
isn't that the truth, man? Yeah, no, it's interesting. With regard to that Dogman, do you think? What's your opinion on it? What do you think that thing is?
I'm not sure. I mean, the more I think about it, I don't know if it's more of a, kind of like a demon dog, so more spiritual, or if it's more of an actual flesh and bone. To me, it seemed more flesh and bone just by how real it seemed and how it appeared to be the exact same thing to all of us. Because I've heard people talk about, them being spiritual, them, a demon dog trying to bring you to hell or something like that. I've had people say that to me before, but I don't see that as the case.
Yeah, especially if you hear it run off. It's just interesting, its behavior. It obviously was trying to get your guys' attention. And you hear that in a lot of Sasquatch encounters where they throw things at you, trying to get your attention. I think most people brush it off like how you did. It must be the squirrels. It must be things falling out of the tree. But it's hard to deny when a piece of a femur bone comes your way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we didn't touch that for a long time. It stayed in the yard. Just stayed there until one day it was gone. I guess the neighbor dog must have taken it off somewhere. But we just never touched it. Never wanted to touch it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Was there anything else that happened on that property?
No, not that I can think of there. Only other thing I can think of is when I went to West Virginia to stay the summer with my grandpa. He saw my tattoo, my Bigfoot tattoo, and he went, "So you believe in Bigfoot?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "Well, you're gonna be staying in the cabin," and he's like, "You'll hear whooping up there." And he said he messes with messes with me all the time. So he would go up there and he would whoop and try to get it to call back, but anytime I was there, it never did. But he swears up and down that it'll whoop back up at him in the mountains.
What's going on at the cabin? Is there is he being harassed, or is it more or less just vocals back and forth?
Vocals back and forth, and then just stuff getting moved around. He has a lot of hunting cabins up there, and things will be moved around from him or stuff like that. But he said mostly it's just vocals.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Well, I ask everyone, Adam, what do you think that Sasquatch is? What's your opinion? And there's no wrong answer.
Yeah. Well, with each encounter, it gets more and more confusing. The more I go into this rabbit hole, it gets more and more confusing. I'd see it more as flesh and bone, more as a creature, very human-like and intelligent. I don't see it as more of a spiritual or anything like that. I see him more as more of a flesh and bone, intelligent creature.
Yeah, I think that they are very physical. I think there's something weird about them, but who knows what they are. It's like the Dogman. I keep thinking about that Dogman stepping out of the woods in front of you guys, and it almost seems like a science experiment that went bad, doesn't it? It has the body of a man and the head of a dog.
Yeah, it was crazy, and I'd never wanted to say anything about it or anything like that until I heard your other podcast about other people having the same encounter, and that's what made me even decide to say something about it. Because I always thought no one else is going to have this encounter until I heard other people, and it's definitely out there.
Yeah, it's definitely out there, and you can definitely run into it. And it's, I appreciate you coming forward and sharing it. I hear a lot of Dogman encounters off the air, but most people don't want to come on the air and talk about it. And I've had cops, I've had doctors, I've had I mean, you name it. I've had preachers run into Dogman. Most people that run into it, one thing that they'll, and I know a lot of the reviewers hate it when I say this, but with Dogman in particular, a lot of people say it's evil. What I saw was evil. And I don't know if it's a feeling, because I've never seen a Dogman. I don't know if it's a feeling they get or why that comes up a lot with people. Maybe it's just seeing something weird and it shouldn't exist.
Yeah, it's a lot of fear. I mean, when you see something like that and you have no idea, no explanation. So I definitely understand why people would see him as evil. But if he wanted to do some damage, he could have, and he didn't.
Yeah, one other question I want to ask you, Adam. I don't want to hold you too long. How tall do you think that thing was, that Dogman that stepped out?
I would say about the size of my brother, so 6'5", 6'6". It was fairly tall.
I got you. It wasn't like 10 foot. It wasn't like 10 feet tall or anything like that.
No, nothing too ridiculous. No, it seemed like it was about his size, because when he stood up and they both stood up kind of, and they were only 20 feet away from each other, so they seemed pretty close in stature. Other than the fact that thing's legs were so muscular.
Yeah, were the legs bent in any way, or did it stand up like a man?
They were more bent. Kind of bent at the knees a little bit more than a man would stand. But I don't know if it was ready to jump or what. More of like a runner stance.
I gotcha. Well, keep me up to date. Let me know if anything else out there happens on that property, will you?
I will. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Next up, I want to welcome Jack to the show. Jack, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I know you're retired military, and I guess we'll just say you were high up on the food chain with regard to the military.
I'm okay to say I was a field grade officer, which is a senior officer in the military.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you coming on. And I know you had an encounter in Fort Lewis. And I was telling you last night, God, I've had so many encounters out of Fort Lewis, you wouldn't believe it. I could write a book just out of the soldiers that have told me what they've run into out there. And a lot of them are very similar to your encounter. But if you would kind of take us back to that moment in Fort Lewis, kind of tell us what happened, if you would.
Okay. And first off, I'll say that I've never talked to anyone who had any experiences at Fort Lewis. So when you mentioned that to me last night, that my experience is very similar to some others, I was like, wow, because I thought I was the only one that experienced or had anything, because we really don't talk about it. When I was out there, I was focused on just getting through the training I was doing. So I'll take you how I got there and then what happened. So I was an ROTC in college, and if you're an ROTC, the summer before your senior year, you have to go away to training for the summer to put all your skills and learn everything about the field and that type of thing. And they send everyone, at the time they sent them to Fort Knox, or I think it was Fort Bragg or Fort Riley. I can't remember, but there were two places. Because of my location in the United States in Indiana, I went to Fort Lewis. And at Fort Lewis, we get there, and it's just my first time on a plane, first time in a big city of Seattle or any big city, that type of thing. A country boy going to the small Indiana school. The next thing you know, I'm in Fort Lewis. So got into the training, and we were all there from all different colleges around the country, and we're all there just as cadets trying to learn how to be, a second lieutenant or an officer in the Army. We get there, and this is the late 80s. So we get there, and we go through all the training, learn how to do land navigation, patrolling. We take a PT test, physical fitness test, take all these things and just get through all the basics. Then the last event we had for the course was a 5 or 6 day exercise called Adventure Challenge. An Adventure Challenge was where you take all these skills that you learned and you're tested on them and evaluated as a collective. And we were a platoon. And so we were out there to do things as a collective unit. So we got on helicopters, Blackhawks, and they flew us out there like it was a tactical insertion. About 15, 20 minutes on a Blackhawk, flying is probably, over 100 mile an hour out there. So we were way out there in Fort Lewis. I remember just being in the middle of nowhere. They drop us off on this empty field, grassy field. We jump out, and we have blanks, and our platoon is out there to do all this training with all these blanks and just to react. And we do after-action reviews after we do an assault or an ambush or anything like that. It's really just a lot of training as a collective unit. And assigned to us were 2 Special Forces non-commissioned officers or sergeants. And they were there to help us as far as learning our techniques and review what we've done and that type of thing. So the sergeants were, I think one was a Vietnam vet. I'm not sure the other one was, but I remember that. One of the sergeants was a Vietnam veteran. And we all listened to him, and he would tell us how to go through the brush and how to lay down an ambush, how to do a perimeter, and all these type of things, all patrolling techniques, which is what we're there to learn how to do. And we'd never done any of this before. So there was some prior service in the unit, but most of us were just brand new like myself. So we start the exercise, and like I said, 5 or 6 days. You're inserted into the middle of nowhere, Fort Lewis, and you have to patrol back to get out of enemy territory, so to speak. And you consider everything around you as enemy territory, and it's all part of the exercise. We also had other units out there, and there's like a force-on-force exercise. Like we had little blue ribbons, I think, tied to our one of our buttonholes, and they had like red ribbons tied to their buttonholes. So like a red army versus blue army type of thing. We moved 24 hours at a time, and we would sleep on the ground and just sleep as we could. Whenever it was not really there was no camp bivouac or any of that type of site. It was always just moving around, and it was actually a good exercise for later on with other things. But still, at the time, we were just going through this, and my goal, everyone's goal, was just to make it out of there and pass this whole course, and then get commissioned a lieutenant the next year. So I was just focusing on being the best I could to pass all these things. I'd never been to anything like this in the military, and I was just wanting to be successful. So as we go through all this, we're out in the middle of the nowhere, and we're doing these patrols, and we have those 2 Green Berets, the Special Forces guys assigned to us to teach us tips, tactics, techniques, that type of thing. And this one night, it's probably 2 or 3 in the morning. It's dark, middle of the night, middle of nowhere, and we're in the forest, and all you can see in front of you is just your buddies. We call them cat eyes, and the cat eyes are these little slits of luminescent tape that are sewn onto the back of the hat or the headgear of the guy in front of you. And they're purposely for this patrolling. So that's all you can see is a little glint of a glow. It's so dark. And that's how you know where the guy's in front of you. And we're practicing what's called noise and light discipline, where no flashlights, try to be as quiet as you can, that type of thing. A lot of patrolling techniques you don't want to be seen or known about. You're just trying to get in and get out, that type. So we were just doing that. And we get out there, and we're doing this one night, and can't see my hand in front of me, but I can see those little cat eyes in front of the guy in front of me. And as we're walking along the forest, we hear beside us, probably about 20 yards out, I could have thrown a rock and hit this. That's how close it was, but it wasn't where I could see it. Again, you couldn't see anything, but it's thumping through the woods, and it's paralleling us, wherever this was. And I'm not going to say it's Bigfoot or it's a person or anything. I'm just going to tell you the facts that I observed them. This thing was clumping on the ground. When it walked, it was bipedal. It was, 2 feet, and it was shaking the ground. I could feel it through my boots. I could feel it bouncing around out there. And this went on for a little bit. When we would stop, it would stop. When it would move, it would move. Now, we're trying to be as quiet as we can, but we're still making noise because there's 38 or 40 of us out there walking in a line. We're still going to make some noise. And this thing was just paralleling us. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it other than I thought it was kind of odd. It was so heavy. But, we're expecting enemy contact. We're in exercise. It's the whole big hype of this. So we stop, and I hear, I'm about 3rd or 4th back from the front. And I hear the Green Beret, the Vietnam vet, tell us all to hold tight. And we all stopped. I couldn't exactly hear the wording to the front guy, but it was basically hold in place. I could hear him whispering up there, just wait here for a minute. I hear him go out because you could hear walking in the woods. He goes out there, and about a very short time later, he comes running back. He says, "We got to get out of here." So we all quickly got out of there and didn't think anything of it other than, this guy, they're trying to mess with us or whatever. But his voice was really animated when he came back. So we're just thinking whatever, and we're still practicing noise and light discipline, still thinking this is part of the exercise. So we get out of there and kept walking all night, and then finally, when the sun came up, we stopped and we all gathered around in a circle and had an MRE as best we could. And as we're doing that, we started talking about what happened last night. And people are saying, the people up front were saying, "Oh my gosh, the Green Beret, whatever his NCO, whatever his name was, the Sergeant Smith, I'll call him, was so upset about what he saw out there and experienced. He thought we were threatened and told us to get out of the area." So I'm not sure what it was, not sure what happened exactly, other than it was heavy. I could definitely feel it as it walked. It was bipedal, and we all heard it. It wasn't next to me. It was more up toward the front a little bit, but it was close enough where I could, if we shined lights on it or had sun out, we definitely would have saw whatever it was. But again, we're just practicing with the exercise. So that was the story I have at Fort Lewis. We finished the exercise and graduated and left, and I didn't think anything much of it until I started paying attention to all the Bigfoot shows and people seeing Bigfoot. And then I was like, wow, I wonder what that was back then. And I started thinking of it, and people were reporting similar events somewhere else. And that's where I started thinking that it could be something that I encountered, although I don't know what it was. It could have been, an 800-pound person. I have no idea what was out there, but I just know that it was not one of us, and it was not in shape like an Army person, under 200 pounds. It was something gigantic.
Yeah, and
so
I get a ton of those reports out there, Jack. I mean, I was telling you last night, I've probably heard from well over 100 soldiers out there. Very similar story, almost identical to your story. Sometimes they see it, sometimes they don't, but it parallels them as they're going through that training. Different, whether it's cold weather training or the adventure training or very similar accounts out there. And sometimes guys report it. I mean, I've even heard of guys out there that go out for a run, kind of very similar to Chris's account when he was in Alabama and he was being paced. I even had one soldier at Fort Lewis tell me that he just pulled his rifle up and started shooting, and he realized he had blanks. He wasn't shooting anything. It just was making a lot of noise. And I think he was reprimanded for it, but he told me, he goes, "I'm telling you, that was not other soldiers. That was not a human. This thing was huge, and it was stalking me from the side. When I ran, it ran. When I stopped, it stopped." Very similar accounts. That's fascinating out there. I guess welcome to Washington.
Yeah. The thing that got me after I thought about this was how much danger we were in, because all we had were blanks, and we were all college kids. We weren't in the Army yet. We were trying to be in the Army and learn how to be a leader in the Army. But I mean, hardly any of us were prior service, and it was gigantic. And if it would have come after us, there's not much we could do. But what got me later when I thought about it, and I didn't mention this yesterday, was the intelligence of it. Because an animal won't stop when you stop and won't walk when you walk.
Yeah, absolutely. And also to the Special Forces guys' reaction. I know some Special Forces guys, and they're not men that will run off very easily on anything. It's hard to really spook those guys to get them to run away from something. You know what I mean?
That's exactly what I thought. I thought that people are pulling jokes on us or whatever, but no, it was. After we reflect back on it the next morning, we're all, eating a crappy pork patty that's dehydrated as an MRE. We're sitting there talking about it. It's like, wow, what was that and what caused all that? And then the next thing we know, we got the next exercise, next event to get through this course. And like I said, our focus was on graduating, and this just got lost in the memory of my mind forever until I started hearing more of these stories about Bigfoot. And I'm like, well, I wonder if that was what happened. And when you told me yesterday that you've had a lot of encounters of similar things, it was like, wow, maybe that could have been. I really don't know, but I can just report what happened, and it was definitely something very odd.
Yeah, a lot comes out of that Fort Lewis. I want to ask you about Iraq, if you don't mind talking about it. And I brought it up last week, and I got a lot of emails about it. I've had a lot of soldiers tell me you'll see weird things out in the desert in the middle of the night. And I brought up the black dogs, and a lot of soldiers told me about these black dogs they just run into in the middle of the desert out there. And they're not really sure if they're real dogs or if it's the jinn, or because I know the jinn is a big thing over in the Middle East. But would you mind talking about what happened over in Iraq?
Yeah, I'll tell you the whole thing. Again, keeping anonymity of myself, but what happened was I was assigned as a commander of a gun truck company and the transportation company. And I won't mention the exact years we're over there, but it was early in the war. I had 3 deployments, and the last one I was the commander. And our mission as the commander of the gun truck company, so to speak, was to provide security for third country nationals or even the U.S. forces, our allies, moving up and down the highways over there. So we traveled all the way from, I mentioned last night, from Turkey to Kuwait, from Syria and Jordan over to Iran. I mean, we traveled all over that country. So this main route we used to go on a lot was called MSR Tampa. It's called Main Supply Route Tampa. And anyone who's been over there will immediately know what I'm talking about. It's I think Iraqi route number 1. It's the main north-south thoroughfare from like Harbor Gate in Turkey down to Baghdad. So we were traveling we traveled all the time. I mean, every day we had a mission out there to do some kind of patrol or carry supplies or escort third country national trucks or something. So as a commander, I always let the non-commissioned officers run the convoys themselves, and I just went along as backup. And I'd always ride in the trucks. I made sure that I rode in the trucks and everyone else rode in the trucks, and I hardly ever took our Humvees outside the base because it's just too dangerous. The trucks were higher up and they had more metal between us and the road, so if something happened, if a bomb went off, best chance of surviving are the higher and farther away you can get from the bomb blast. So this is about midway through the convoy, or I'm sorry, midway through the tour, the situation I'll tell you about. And we're traveling all over the place over there. We're up north of Tikrit and a base in Baji. It was, I think, a special forces base was in Baji. We're up north of that on MSR Tampa. And this MSR Tampa was 2 lanes going north and 2 lanes going south at the median in the middle. And when you get way up there north of those areas, there's away from the Tigris and Euphrates, there's no canals or anything that give water. It's just all desert. There's nothing there but just sand all over the place. And the road is not like a normal road either. It's got, sands creeping in on the sides. It's just not like you'd think a 2-lane road in the United States. It's kind of out there. So we're traveling, and we traveled all different times. The windows of travel varied based on mission requirements. Sometimes it's 2 in the afternoon. Sometimes it's 4 in the morning. Sometimes it's midnight. It all depends on when they'd secure the routes and when we'd travel. This one time we're traveling at probably, I guess, middle of the morning, 2 or 3 in the morning. And we're traveling from a base going south back to our base in south of Tikrit. So we're heading back down that way. And again, I was the commander of the unit, but I was always about the 3rd vehicle back. The convoy commander was the senior NCO, the senior sergeant. He was the 2nd vehicle back. And the 1st vehicle was the gun truck. It was a 50 cal gun truck. And we had 50 caliber machine guns and Mark 19 grenade launchers, and we had 4 M60s all throughout the whole unit, provide support in case something happened. So we're traveling at night, and we're traveling in blackout conditions. And for those that don't know, in the military, blackout means there's no headlights on. There's this little bitty tiny light that shines like a little pin light on the ground. It's really hard to see anything. But we had 7 Delta night vision we would wear. And you could, with the night vision, it would make it look like it was a regular headlight out with that little light. So you could basically see in front of you, and you couldn't see beside you or anything, but you see where you're going. And you couldn't travel full speed. You can travel, 30 or 35, maybe 40 mile an hour. So we're traveling down MSR Tampa in blackout conditions in the middle of the night. And before I get to what happened, all the time, just about every time, we would look out into the desert at midnight or 2 in the morning, when there's no light and there's no sun, there's nothing, there's no moon, nothing. And you look out with those night vision, it looks like there's things moving out there all the time. Now, it could be the night vision was trying to interpret, not having any ambient light. I'm not sure, but it looked like something was always moving out there. And people called it dragons. People called it people running around out there. It always looked like something was going on out there. Can't say what it was, and we just finally started ignoring it because it happened every time. So maybe it was the night vision trying to adjust to no ambient light whatsoever. So back to where we're heading south, and we're in blackout, and as we're heading south, you see a little light in the median, way up in the distance. And again, we're in the middle of nowhere. There's no trees. There's no anything but sand. On the median, sand on the sides, sand everywhere, except for the pavement where the road is. And there's a little light way up there. And we travel closer, and again, we're thinking we've been hit, several times. We're thinking this is some type of either checkpoint or enemy act, something's going on. So we get closer, and you can see through the night vision, it's a campfire about the size, probably 3 or 4 feet tall. And there's wood. It looked like it had just been placed there within, half an hour. It wasn't burnt all the way down. It was a fire still burning. And immediately what I thought was, this is something odd that the enemy had put in place that, and I thought maybe that they can't see us, but they can hear our trucks. And they're putting this so that it's in the median so that when our trucks go by, they'll see the shadow of the truck or the blackout of the truck to the fire, and they're out in the desert and they detonate detonate a bomb or something. I wasn't sure what it was. So I told our guys to switch over to the oncoming lane. Again, there's no traffic out. So we switch over to the oncoming lane before we get to it. We all go by it. I'm looking at it. It was the oddest thing, just a fire of wood in the middle of nowhere with no trees, nothing around, nothing anywhere. And I couldn't see anything moving. As we get past it, our rear gunner, who's the guy facing 6 o'clock as you're driving, he's facing behind us. He had a 50 cal back there. He says he sees sort of translucent people running around there. Not sure what it was. I didn't give any credibility to it at the time. I said, okay, fine. I called it in on the mobile transcriber system I talked about, the little system you can send a character, 140, like a Twitter, 140 text character through satellite to my command and to Crete. And I sent that, hey, just marking it, this is something odd, not sure what it is. And I sent that, and that's all I said about it. And I forgot about it till next day when we're in base. And I talked to some of the local Iraqis that worked on the base. And even though they had broken English, I explained the situation to them. I said, what was that? And they explained that was the jinn. The jinn. Well, I didn't even know what the jinn was. The D-J-I-N-N, I believe. I'm not sure how you spell it, but that's the jinn. It's what they kept saying. Oh, the jinn, the jinn. They're out in the desert. You stay away from them. What is the jinn? And they explained that is, according to, and someone has to correct me if I'm wrong, but according to the Quran, Allah made two beings at the same time. They made humans and they made the jinn. And the jinn are more like in another dimension or another plane of reality, whatever they are, and humans are on this plane. And the jinn are equal to humans as far as being able to sin or, forgiveness, that type of thing. But they exist along with us. And the Iraqis just, yes, the jinn, like it was you and I talking about cars on the highway. It was something that just happens all the time. And that was my experience. I didn't see anything. I got the report about the translucent people from the 6 o'clock gun truck, and I just, I'm here trying to get everyone back home. I'm not really thinking about that stuff. And then I come back and I start thinking about, wow, what was that? But that was my story of Iraq.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Did you ever talk to the guy running the gun truck and ask him what he saw? Because that's bizarre, yeah. Translucent people. You know what I mean? Yeah, I
did. I talked to him. He was very animated about it. But my thought was I racked it up to, our night vision, just trying to make sense of no ambient light. But he claims that they were right by the fire. He saw them right by the fire. And they were there. And I didn't see anything. I wasn't really looking there at the fire. I was looking out in the desert because I was for sure thought that we were going to get hit again by whatever roadside bomb they'd placed there. And it was going to be a firefight and this type of thing. But I was waiting for that to happen, so I wasn't paying attention. But after we got through there, the rear gunner was facing 6 o'clock behind us, and that's his job, is to watch that area. And he said he saw them, and he's really animated about it. But I just, okay, fine. Next mission, that's how I was toward it, because we had another mission the next day and another mission and another, and it just went on until I got back here and I started thinking about that. I was like, what the heck was that? So,
and I think I can understand that. I'd probably be counting down the days till I can get the hell out of there. You know what I mean? And that would be my focus. But it is weird. I've heard a lot of soldiers talk about a lot of weird things they see out in the desert in the middle of the night out there. And it all gets chalked up to gin. Whenever they talk to a local, it's always the gin is mentioned. It's fascinating stuff, man. It's very fascinating stuff. I know a lot of soldiers don't like to hear it, but thank you so much for your service, and God bless you for doing that. Whether people agree with the war or don't agree with the war, you got to give respect to someone who will volunteer and go over there and stand a post, regardless of your feelings on a war. You know what I mean? War, I don't think even soldiers like war. I don't think anyone really likes war. I think if you love war, there's something wrong with you. But you got to love the soldiers who go over there and volunteer for that.
Well, Wes, I can tell you, I'll tell you two things about that. The first, the real heroes to me, and every soldier will say this, are the soldiers that didn't make it out of there. All hats off to their families and them and everything they went through. It's just such an ordeal to be involved in something like that and then have something horrific like that happen. So number one. Number two, some people, very few, would really get off on that adrenaline of combat and that type of thing, but I was not one of them. I hated it. I just wanted to get it over with and do my mission, do my job, and protect the country and get out of there. That's all I thought about. And that was my last deployment. I haven't been deployed since then. And when I got back, that was my 3 back to back to back. They said, all right, whatever assignment, whatever you want. So I went to Hawaii after that and never looked back. I just chilled, and now I retired. So that's how my service was.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear it's horrible over there. I've never been over there, but I hear it's horrible. And well, let me ask you, going back to Bigfoot, Jack, what do you think that Sasquatch is? I like to ask everyone, and I'm sure you've heard the show. There's no wrong answer that anyone can give because no one really knows. But what do you think that Sasquatch is?
I've thought about it, and my times in the military, and I've been part of investigative teams and that type of thing, and just based on the pure evidence that there's thousands of reports all over the place of the same type of thing happening. I think that it's definitely a biological creature. Not sure if it's more man than ape or more ape than man. I don't know, but there's all these undiscovered species being found every day, or hundreds or so. So I think it's something undiscovered. I also think that a lot of people say, well, where's the bodies? Where's the body at? And my answer to that is that you can go to any major city in the United States. If you're an alien coming down to visit any major city, and your proof of a civilization or a species is where's the bodies? Well, humans don't exist because there are no bodies laying around anywhere. We collect and police up our dead and bury them properly. And who's to say that didn't happen with, things that happen with Bigfoot or Sasquatch? I don't know. I'm not there. And then a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to believe it till I see it. And my answer to that was, have you ever been to Africa? How do you know it's there? If you've never seen it, never been there, you can tell there's Africa by the evidence of it. So if all these people say the same thing and they all have the same experiences, I'm not about to call any of them, they're making it up or falsifying the story. I think there's something there. I don't think it's anything paranormal or that type of thing. I think it's an actual species. When I heard some of the stories on your show about Indiana, which is my home state, I was like, wow, and those people sound very credible. So I believe it's some kind of undiscovered species, and I think there will be scientific proof in the next 10 to 15 years that will definitively say what it is, and then they'll be able to protect it and keep it, because it's very low numbers, and they'll be able to have a better way of dealing with it than being scoffed at all the time. That's just my take on it. I don't talk about it much in my job and the military. I didn't hardly ever say anything about it because, I have a security clearance and I don't want any hiccups with that whatsoever. So, but that's my, my educated guess on what it is. It's definitely something biological. That's something that will be discovered definitively within 10 to 15 years.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. It would have been nice to ask that Special Forces soldier, the Vietnam guy, what he ran into, wouldn't it have been?
Yes, my thought on that was, when I look back at how he reacted, he was trying to keep us from freaking out. Let's get out of here. Let's move. Come on, move, because he was in charge of training us on all the little techniques you learn when you're patrolling. And dealing with a Bigfoot is not a technique that you learn when you're patrolling. So this is not something we know how to do or even prepared to encounter or deal with. So he was just, let's get all these kids to safety. I think is what he was thinking.
Yeah, no doubt. Jack, thanks for coming on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
No, I appreciate the honor, and I'm a big fan, and I listen to you all the time. So thank you very much.
Next up, I want to welcome Emily to the show. Emily, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. And I know you had an encounter in Missouri or Missouri, depending on which part of the state you're in.
Yeah, sure.
I get a lot of crap for that. But if you would, tell us what happened. What were you doing? And walk us into what happened.
Well, my husband and I had decided to go camping for our anniversary. This was on June 2nd of this year, and we found a place that we were going to be the only campers there. It was in the middle of the woods, and so we went out there. It was probably just about half a mile off the road, but out in the country where there wasn't a ton of traffic or anything. So we drove down, got to our campsite, and walked down to the water, saw that, came back, set up everything for camp. And my husband decided he wanted to go back down to the water and go swimming. I told him I didn't want to go. So he walked down. It's kind of down a cliff area. I guess it's called a wash. I didn't know what it was called at the time, but I just knew we had to climb our way down over stumps and rocks and things like that. So he went down there. I decided to stay at camp, and I was going to lay down for a little bit after we'd gotten the tent set up. And I kind of started to feel a little bit uneasy as he started walking down, and kind of hollered back at him to, hey, wait, I'm going to come with you, or why don't you not go? But he didn't hear me, so he kept going. And just a few minutes after he had left the camp, I heard a big tree. I didn't see anything, but I heard a tree, what sounded like a tree falling in the woods off in the direction that he had gone. So I was like, oh my gosh, I hope that wasn't him. I hope, he didn't lean on a tree that was, half dead and knock it over. I hope he's okay. But I tend to be a worrier, so I told myself, just chill out, he's fine, and told myself I was going to give him 20 minutes to come back up. And about, maybe a minute after I heard the tree fall, I heard what sounded like tree knocks, kind of in a different direction than where the tree fell. 3 tree knocks in a pattern. Just not long after that, a few seconds after that, I heard 3 tree knocks coming from the other direction. And so my initial thought was, when I first heard him, I was like, oh my gosh, I hope that's not him, being the worrier that I am, trying to get my attention that, he's hurt or something. And then I heard the other 3 in another direction, and I was just like, oh, that's weird. I'm sure it's not him. I'm going to give him 20 minutes. So I tried to lay down and just kept hearing what I thought was him coming back up the hill, just kind of rustling in the brush and stuff around. So I, stood up and look out the tent window and couldn't see anything. It wasn't him. And that happened probably I don't know, 3 or 4 times, I guess. And then finally, it felt like forever. I don't know how long it actually was, but he came up the hill as quick as he could come up that hill, being so steep and everything. But he thought I had been honking the horn trying to get his attention, that I was in trouble. So I hadn't been, but I just thought that was interesting that had happened. So we made dinner, went on about things. At some point, we can't remember exactly when it was that day, but at some point we heard kind of a grunt. It sounded, I even said to him, maybe we should get the gun and have it right next to us, because that kind of sounds like wild hogs and they're dangerous. So we got the gun and put it next to us. But I don't know why I did this, but I even walked down the trail kind of where I heard the grunt coming from to see if I could see anything, and I didn't see anything and didn't hear anything else. So I came back and we made dinner and enjoyed the evening around the campfire. We brought out a speaker, played some music, cooked dinner and all that stuff. And about 10:30 or so, I just all of a sudden kind of felt nauseous. My stomach was hurting and I started getting chills, like I was getting sick, and just an overall general feeling of not feeling well. I decided that I was going to go ahead and go to bed for the evening, for the night. And so I went to the tent, crawled in bed, and he decided to stay out by the fire. We had tiki torches around our fire too, so we could see off a little bit more into the woods. So I felt super comfortable and safe going to sleep at that time, and I liked having the noise of the music. And so anyway, I'm guessing it was around midnight, I heard him start blowing out the tiki torches and thought in my head, oh crap, it's about to get really dark and really quiet. And I don't like the dark at all. If I was convinced that we wouldn't have started a forest fire, I would have left the fire going. But that made me nervous to do. So I hear him blowing out everything. So I'm like trying to get back to sleep before he goes to bed, so I don't have to think about it being dark and quiet. And he comes in and he was like telling me that he had gone over into the woods to go to the bathroom before coming into the tent, and he had heard something growl at him from the woods. So I'm trying not to freak myself out. And so I was just like, oh, that's weird. And we talked for a couple more minutes and said goodnight and started trying to go to sleep. Probably, I don't know, it wasn't very long, less than 5 minutes after we said goodnight, I started hearing some rustling behind our tent. And so I kind of lifted my head off the pillow so I could use both ears to hear it. And I didn't say anything to my husband. He was actually the one that said to me first, oh my gosh, do you hear that? And I said, yeah, what is that? And he was like, I don't know, just be quiet. And so his head is off the pillow at this point too. And we're just listening intently, but we're trying to be really quiet. I told him, I said, I don't even feel like I was breathing at that point. I was just trying to be so calm. But in my head, I'm thinking, how do I get the gun out of the safe, the lockbox, without drawing attention to us in the tent? Because I didn't even know what to think at that point, what it was. But I guess my initial thought was, is that a man? I originally thought it was the guy that we had rented the campsite from. I was like, oh my gosh, is he messing with us? Because it sounded like a man walking in the woods through the brush with boots on. That was the weight of the steps. And then I thought, no, that's dumb. He could get himself shot. But it was so weird because Bigfoot never crossed my mind. Sasquatch never crossed my mind at that point. I don't think I had anything except for a man cross my mind of what it could be. So, but I was trying to figure out how to get the gun so I could use it if I needed to. And so it kind of walked behind our tent, and we looked the next day, and there was not very much space between our tent and the edge of the woods. Like, we were backed right up against it within, 2 feet probably of the edge of the woods. So it walked right behind our tent. It felt like it was over our heads, really. And then walked on my side where I was sleeping and around the front, and what sounded like around the campfire, did a circle around the campfire and then off into the other side of the woods. At that point, when we heard it walk away, I don't know, my body just reacted in the strangest way. I've never had anything like that before. I started shaking uncontrollably, crying, but not crying, but just tears running down my face. And just going, oh my gosh, what was that? What was that? What was that? And my husband's trying to comfort me, and it's gone, it's fine. We're okay. Sorry, it's taking my breath away.
No, it's all right. Happy anniversary, by the way.
Thank you very much. So, I'm still shaking uncontrollably, and maybe 2 minutes later, we hear it or something like it, same footsteps, same everything, coming back from where it had gone off into the woods. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's coming back. What do we do? And my husband told me to grab our key fob that was in one of the pouches in the tent. So I grabbed it, and he said, if it gets any closer, push the lock button so the lights will light up and hopefully it'll scare it away. And so I leaned forward and grabbed it, and I handed him the gun. We had unlocked the safe by then. I handed him the gun, and I said, you have to take this because I'm shaking too much. It's dangerous for me to have it. And so it came in closer to camp again, and so I hit the buttons a couple times, and the lights went off on the car, and we heard it walk along the road that was on my husband's side of the tent and off into the other side of the woods where it had come from originally. And then we heard a skirmish, but louder than a skirmish, really. What sounded like 2 animals fighting, but bigger animals off in that side of the woods. And so I hit my keys a couple more times, and then the woods went silent, and there was nothing anymore. So I told him, I cannot sleep in this tent. We have got to get in the car. I've got to get in the car somehow, because even if it doesn't come back, there's no way I would be able to sleep that night. So we got our pillows and blankets, and he got the gun, and I got the keys, and we mad dashed for the car, got in and locked everything up, and just sat there kind of in disbelief for a little bit, and then started talking like, what the heck was that? And kind of comparing our stories to make sure we'd heard the same thing, because it was just so weird. We'd never experienced anything close to that before. So it wasn't until, I guess, the next morning, I sent a message to the landowner and said, told him, we had a big animal come behind our tent last night. Any ideas what it might be? And he initially said probably a deer, but then he responded with, or Bigfoot, and then listed off, all of the other animals that were around there: raccoons, coyotes, possums, armadillos, and an occasional bobcat, he said. So my husband and I kind of decided, it was probably a bobcat, but really not with any, we had seen them around a little bit, but with no real knowledge about bobcats or anything. So yeah. I guess it was a week later, I was talking to my sisters about this whole experience, and kind of told them what the landowner had said to us about Bigfoot, and they were like, you need to follow up with him and see if there was any truth behind that little comment. And so, at the risk of, sounding crazy, I sent him a text and just said, hey, I haven't been able to get this off my mind, and I just, I'm a believer in Bigfoot. I have been for a very long time. I've never had an experience before this, or I didn't think I'd had an experience before this, but I didn't know if there was any truth to your little Bigfoot joke that you had made in our last text conversation. And all he responded back was, "I'm intrigued." So I just spilled the story to him, and he was, said that's very interesting. Told him about the snorts, and he said, deer snort sometimes, but he couldn't rule out wild hogs. But I feel like if it had been hogs, we would have heard more than what we heard, because it was really just a single snort that we had heard that day. And then we heard one the next day as we were getting ready to leave the camp. And then he told me that he had caught something interesting on his trail cam that same night, the night of June 2nd when we were there. And the timestamp on the trail cam is about 45 minutes before we had our incident. So I went and looked, and he had caught an orb or a light on his trail cam, just kind of hovering there, which I didn't realize that the lights had anything to do with Sasquatch until I was listening to some of your podcasts. And I listened, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's legit, and that's scary. So that's when I decided I needed to contact you to share my story too.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. And I might post a screenshot of the orb. I can embed it on the website because he posted it on Facebook, but I don't know that I want to do that because it'll give away the location, but I'd rather just post a picture of the orb. It is an orb flying around. Well, I say orb like ball of light flying around. One thing that's interesting, Emily, is a lot of times when you pull up to an area like that, whether you've had a Bigfoot encounter or not, and that uneasy feeling you were feeling when you first got there, most people brush it off. And I always tell people, pay attention to that. That's your gut telling you something's not right. I think if it would have been a hog, you would have heard it. They're loud when they rut, when they snort. Right. A deer's not going to throw you off. A deer. You could take a child and say, what animal do you think this is making this noise? Most of them will say a deer. Did your husband see anything when he heard the growl?
No, he didn't see anything. He said he heard the growl and didn't feel good about it, and so he quickly got into the tent. But he didn't see anything.
What do you think was going on there?
I don't know. I know that it was at the beginning of the season, when campers go out there and stuff. So he rents out that property on a regular basis, but it hadn't been stayed in all winter, and not very many people go camping in the spring while it's still cool there. So I'm guessing maybe we were some of the first ones of the season, and I don't know if it was Sasquatch that maybe it had gotten used to having its own space there and didn't like that we were coming down and intruding in the space. But I don't know. It was interesting because even though I was scared at the time, like I've never been scared in my life, I didn't feel like it was like an imminent attack or anything like that. I don't know, because I wasn't even thinking Sasquatch at the time, so I was thinking more along the lines of, I don't even know. I literally didn't have any animal cross my mind because it sounded so human, just the steps. And I don't know why Sasquatch didn't cross my mind, because I've been a believer for a long time, even though I don't know, it was just something within me, I guess. I've never had what I would call an encounter or anything. So I don't know why it never crossed my mind.
Did the landowner ever go into detail why he said or Bigfoot, or was he just joking? Do you know?
He never went into any details. I did say at the end of one of my texts, after telling him the whole story, I hope you don't think I'm crazy. I'm really not. And he just responded with, "I do not think you're crazy," with an exclamation mark. And that was the only clue that he gave me that maybe he knew more than he was telling us. But I felt like he knew enough that I'm not going to go back to that property ever. So, yeah, because I don't want to chance it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. What did your husband think was going on that night? Did he ever tell you what his opinion was?
He originally thought bobcat, but then we saw a trail cam video of a bobcat on that same property, and we both agreed that there's no way that is what was making the noises because it was so small. And even if there was a larger one, I still don't think a bobcat is big enough to make the noises that we heard. So basically his conclusion as of now is that we don't know, because he's not a believer in Sasquatch. I think I've gotten him thinking a little more about it lately, but
tell your husband he cuts me deep.
I know, right? I know. It kills me that he's just like, I'm like, how can you not believe there's something there?
No, I get it. I get it completely where he's coming from. But a bobcat doesn't really make sense because they're not really that big. And I've come across a few bobcats, and they're pretty stealthy. They're pretty quiet when they're moving through the forest. I mean, rarely will you ever hear a bobcat coming or even see one because they're pretty stealthy, really.
Yeah, well, you definitely heard this coming, even though I don't feel like it was trying to make a whole ton of noise, but it definitely wasn't trying to be quiet either. So I don't know. It is interesting, but I think we definitely have got him thinking. I actually played a bunch of videos off of YouTube of different animal sounds, trying to, help him identify what the growl was that he heard. And so I didn't tell him, what any of them were, and just was like, does this sound like it? Does this sound like it? And it was no, until I found a video of a supposed Sasquatch growl and footsteps and leaves. And it brought tears to my eyes when I heard those footsteps, because it was exactly what we heard that night. And that was the only growl that he said, that's really close. So the other ones, it was definite no's. So that was interesting. I think that got him thinking a lot too, but I think at the same time, he's not ready to admit that they're real yet. So
yeah, and that's okay. That's definitely okay. I was teasing earlier, but that's fine. I get it. When hunters tell me, hey, I've been hunting my whole life and I've never seen anything, I get it. I completely get where you're coming from. One thing I want to ask you, so you've thought about Sasquatch, you've kind of looked into it, then you had this weird encounter. Let me ask you, what do you think that Sasquatch is? What's your opinion, Emily? And there's no wrong answer.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. The more I look into it, the more confused I get, I think, because for so long I just thought just a big ape, or big, walking around the woods. And but I don't know, I think the more I look into it, the more uneasy it makes me. I started hearing about the infrasound and wondering if that's why I got to feeling so bad that night. Just why was I totally fine and then felt like I was pretty sick. So I don't even know. I want to think it's just an ape. I really do. I want to think it's flesh and blood something, but I don't know.
Yeah, you and me both. Both.
I had a couple other instances that, just looking back now, that I didn't think about it being anything, but wondering now if that wasn't something Sasquatch related, just smells while we were out fishing, or one time my sister and I heard a scream in the woods while we were hunting that just made us uneasy, or on the same property as the scream, I found about 4 deer skulls within 10 feet of each other, just laying there, just the skull, no other bones. just things like that. So that part of it makes me think animal, but other parts of it, not so much.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, most of it seems like it's a physical, it leaves trace evidence of where it was at. But there's a lot of weird things that go on. I think when Chris last week, the Run Like Hell episode, he was talking about how is tech, when they do weird things. And that seems like an outrageous out there theory, but maybe not, because there is some weird things that go on with Sasquatch that most people can't explain. But I'm with you. I hope it's nothing more than just an ape we haven't caught up with. I like that theory.
Yeah, that one makes me more comfortable than the others.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Well, Emily, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your account. I enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me share it. I really appreciate that.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.
About limitless infinite life. She is my thunder. No wonder I'm going under the intoxicating danger I like. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Let me float away. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Darkness approaching, deep water keeps flowing. It inhales me in the stormy tide. Endless emotion, a dawn thought, a notion, an epiphany, bring the shore to life. Save me from myself,